Thank you for tuning into the DDT Method podcast. Our guest this week is the incomparable Terence Ruffin. Now, unless you're living under a rock, you know exactly who Terence is. Terence is an IFBB Pro Olympian on the classic physique stage, but what a lot of people don't seem to realize is just how smart this guy is. Terence is what I call one of the most cerebral IFBB pros currently competing. He's incredibly intelligent in not only his nutritional practices, but he's one of the very best active pros when it comes to understanding training and understanding how to train with not only optimal form and execution, but programming the very best type of split to maximize his physique. Tune in today for our episode with Terence Ruffin, and you're guaranteed to learn something. All right, so we are here on the DDT Method podcast, and we have a really special guest today in Terence Ruffin. So if you follow bodybuilding, you know literally exactly who Terence is. And if you don't follow bodybuilding, you probably still have an idea of who he is. But we're going to go over a little bit about Terence and what makes him different than most of the bodybuilders out there. Because as one of the top guys in the sport right now, I've said it a million times, and I was literally just telling him right before we started recording that I think as popular as he is, he's very underrated for what a cerebral competitor he is. And we're talking about leaving no stone unturned and not just going along with the grain and doing what everybody else is doing, but we're talking about leaving no stone unturned and finding out the best way to do everything so everything can be optimized and dialed in. In a time where the word optimized is horribly overused and bastardized on the internet, this is somebody that's doing it right. So whether you do or you don't follow bodybuilding, I would pay close attention because this is a podcast where you'll probably pick up a lot of stuff that you can use as actionables in your training going forward. So before I start rambling too much, Terence, why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown? Like, who are you? How long have you been competing? What's your purpose in bodybuilding, if that's not too all encompassing?
All right. Well, where should I start? I grew up I'll keep it brief, but I kind of give the full synopsis of kind of who I am and where I started. Grew up in a small town in Alabama, 200 people. From there, went to school, whatnot. Eventually, ended up in the military, in the Air Force, and I tried out for Special Forces and ended up not making it. And in my mind, it was because I was a little bit too light. I weighed about 120-ish pounds during that time frame. So decided to try to gain some muscle and go back and do it again. What ended up happening was I ended up getting a good amount of muscle and then finding this sport called bodybuilding. And I just never stopped. So I did 2 Olympias while serving in the Air Force. And once my 6-year contract was up, I started bodybuilding full time. From there, I currently have one of the most class physique shows out of anyone. I think at 9. I'm losing track. I lose track of that stuff. But in addition to that, I've won 2 Arnolds, and I've placed second at the Olympia twice now. So, and I've been a professional for 2025, almost 11 years now.
So we have a decade plus as not just a pro, but a highly competitive pro at that.
Yeah. You can say that.
It's all right. You can get away with saying it because it's true.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed that really stands out about you and your career is over the length of your career, which at this point in bodybuilding standards is a fairly lengthy career, you've never been stagnant. So it's been improvement after improvement year by year. And you can even correlate that with your moving through the ranks, so to speak, and just winning higher profile shows, going further and further, improving your physique. And then, as lame as it sounds, kind of winning over the masses, people that are fans of the more aesthetic classic physiques, even to people that are fans of just like the freakish kind of like, holy shit, gnarly, grainy physiques. You're kind of pulling everybody in because you're bringing a lot of that. I hate to say it because it sounds cliche, but that like 80s, 90s appeal, but with the size that you need to be competitive in classic right now. Is that something that you like set out to do, or is that something that's just kind of coming together from strengthening your weaknesses and whatnot?
Yeah, it's definitely just strengthening my weaknesses. I've never had like a very clear picture of what I would look like. As I gain size, I just take it, section by section, like, oh, I need some more muscle here. Let me work on this. Let me change my programming to match that. Or let me, maybe I want to be a little bit more conditioned, so just let's diet a little bit harder or remove a little bit more stress or, from my life. So, um, it just kind of comes together over time when you focus on the smaller things. The big picture kind of just happens.
So you were talking before about how in the military you think one of the things that was holding you back was being too small. Is putting on size over the course of your career, has that been a challenge for you, or is that something that once you kind of started moving forward, it kind of clicked easily?
I always say it's difficult, and then people are like, "What do you mean?" I think compared to my peers, it's difficult. I have this, like again, I've been doing this 11 years, and there's guys who have popped up in the last 2 3 years that are already, reached like their weight limits in our division. So compared to them, it's difficult, but compared to like the average, person, I would say definitely above average in terms of building muscle. So it depends on what crowd you're chatting with.
Gotcha. Now, what have some of the biggest challenges been? Like, what I know you recently had some injuries situations, and then you had to take some time off. Would you say injuries are the biggest challenge for you? And is there another challenge? And then, kind of, how did you address these things, and how did you proceed through these injury situations and whatnot?
Definitely say more injury prone than most. I mean, even in high school, I would have like certain things I would pull a muscle here and there. Luckily, nothing like very severe, like a tear or like a bone breaking. But I've pulled a lot of muscles, a lot of joint pain here and there over the years. And that's probably the biggest hindrance in terms of progress. As soon as that you get that tendonitis or that pulled muscle, you kind of have to, scale things back for a while when it comes to that. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing for me.
Now, for the past little while, you've taken some time off. You haven't been on stage. So, what was the reasoning behind that, and what have you been doing, kind of behind the scenes?
Yeah, really bad elbow pain. I guess it's just tendonitis, which sounds weird. Like, usually before I've had this injury, like tendonitis, I was like, oh, it probably bothers a person, but it can't be like that bad. But then I've actually experienced it, and then I can't do any back exercises or chest exercises. Even curls hurt, push downs hurt, all of it, you know. Yeah, it was definitely pretty bad. So I originally started with like TV 500, BPC. That didn't really do anything to help. I tried different massage therapists. Though in Florida, I couldn't find one that could really address the issue. So I ended up coming out to Houston, and I found a guy named Dr. Ryan, and he fantastic work. So he got me able to back to being able to train, which was nice. But there still was a ton of pain. So I ended up getting stem cell therapy about 2 3 months ago, and that helped it even more. So I went from like a I don't know, like 30% function of my elbow to after the physical therapy to maybe like a 50, 60. And then after the stem cell therapy, I feel like I'm at a 70, 75 right now. But they say it takes time for the stem cells to kind of do their job, and it could take up to like 6 months. So we're still waiting and hoping that I'm at like 100% soon, because a lot of people I speak to who get this stem cell treatment say they feel better. They feel like 10 years younger by the time it's completely done.
Right. And I think that's to say something about perseverance, because a lot of us will get injured and then we'll try one or two things and it's like, oh, well, this either worked awesome or this didn't work. I guess I'm screwed. So BPC TB 500, I'm sure anybody that you even mentioned any pain to initially just said BPC TB 500, like it's the be all end all, like it's some sort of injectable holy water. And I've used it before for minor things, and I've had some improvements with it. It was a tremendous help to my left knee. It wasn't a big help to my right knee. My right knee ended up being more of a cartilage thing, and that was GHK copper and some growth hormone therapy and red light therapy for that. But that wouldn't have helped the left. It just helped the right. So different injuries and different situations will merit different things to move forward. So, and in your case, physical therapy combined with stem cells seemed like that was kind of like the biggest needle mover in getting you back to being able to train. Did you have to do anything different with your training? Because it's not like I can't imagine you stopped training chest and back.
I just did what I could, you know. Anything, a lot of things I tried to remove, like my elbow from it if I could. Chest, just a lot of flies. I mean, I could do some machines would work, but it took me weeks to figure out what I could do and what I couldn't do, you know. So that was really difficult. Like even just like a certain hand position or like gripping, using my fingers a certain way could cause like some issues when I train. So just kind of playing around in the gym for a few weeks to kind of figure out, okay, this is what I can do and this is what I can't do. This is the exercises that hurt and whatnot. Even for back, I couldn't use like straight bars or like pull downs. I had to use like buy these rotating handles that hook onto the bars so I can kind of my elbow can move freely, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So different things like that. I found just workarounds for as much as I could in terms of training. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, after the stem cell treatment, did you have to take any time off of training, or was it right back to the races when you got back?
They 2 to 4 weeks normally. So I took 2 weeks off from training,
Oh, wow.
and I just stretched and hung out and had a good time because I knew, like a lot of people. I know a lot of bodybuilders like when they have to take time out from the gym, they go crazy.
Right.
For me, I think it's just part of the process. You know, like it doesn't that type of stuff doesn't bother me because I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do in the moment to get back to training. You know, there's no point in stressing and worrying about it right now, and I can find other things to do in the meantime.
Now, did you get like a gnarly training response coming back to training after those 2 weeks off, or did you just find yourself kind of easing back into it?
Um, it felt really good the first couple of weeks. Now it's the progress slowed down a bit in terms of healing, but it was great. Getting back in the gym and like I'm like, holy crap, this feels okay. This feels okay. I can do this exercise now. That was probably just the best part, like the psychological, like motivation from being able to do more stuff.
Awesome. So now that we're kind of back and gearing back up a little bit and just kind of finding the new, I guess, routine to piece together with this injury, hopefully on the mend big time. We're kind of coinciding. I'm going to speak to kind of the bodybuilding fans and bodybuilding purists right now. We're in this really interesting situation because there are several years where everybody had you pegged to be, number one at the Olympia. And now you're kind of on this comeback trail and Chris Bumstead's not there anymore. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts going back into the big picture? Like, what are your plans? Are we planning on full steam ahead right now? Are we feeling out a little bit? And what do you see yourself doing as your next step?
Well, first thing is to win the show I'm doing, the Pittsburgh. So that's the first step of the journey. Um, like I definitely believe I can win the Olympia. It definitely makes it more possible now that Chris is retired. But in my opinion, you truly never know anything, and that's one thing I kind of had to learn. Is like, so everyone's a little different. I know some people like they can know and believe in everything, all 100%, and they lose, and they're totally okay with it. I do need a bit of like realism in my mind for me to do well because if I have zero doubt in my mind that something's going to happen and it doesn't happen, it's really tough for me to deal with. So I take more of like a stoic approach where you can control what you can control, and if you can't control it, it is what it is. So um, definitely very excited. I feel very capable of winning the show. Um, but it's interesting, man. Like I've been doing this since the start of Classic, and each and every year the competition continues to get better. This year will be the first time that like no one from the first Olympia will be competing, in the Olympia, so I'll be, except me, so I'll be the longest running competitor, I guess, or longest competing classic guy this upcoming year. So it's a little strange, so I don't know. I'm excited. I'm happy. I'm grateful to be in a situation to still be able to compete at a high level when a lot of guys that I started with, they're retired now.
So being in the competitive scene at that level for so long, how are some of the ways that you've seen the division evolve, Classic specifically? And then what have you done to kind of keep up with it? Because for as long as you've been around, you're still a young guy. You're still,
Yeah,
in my opinion, probably approaching your prime. So it's one
yeah,
of those things where, having been a pro with so much tenure already, you get to go in with the experience, but it's not like you're weathered and grizzled. I mean, you're beaten up like any other pro is, but
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not in here just trying to hold everything together with duct tape and bubble gum. So how has the division changed, and how have you changed your approach to keep up with the division?
I think, I mean, like in turn, size is a big difference. I mean, they've increased the weight limits, I think, 2 or 3 times over the years. But in addition to that, I think one, the posing's gotten better, and just the what's the word I'm looking for? The genetics, like in terms of like structurally, the guys are a lot better. Now that it's getting more popular, you're having more people see it. And so the genetic pool grows. Um, and people are getting into bodybuilding younger and younger, and they have access to better information, way. But I mean, when I started bodybuilding compared to like what kids know now, it's completely different. I was like, yo, I remember like 4 or 5 years, 5 years ago, I would be talking about things like resistance curves and whatnot, or, you need to do this with your setup. And that's just common knowledge now. You don't even need to say it anymore. Uh, so just the level of knowledge, the size of the guys, and just, yeah, it's completely different landscape.
It's crazy to look at exactly what you were just saying about like the information that's out there now versus what the information was back then. And I think I'm a little older than you. I'm about week and a half away from 40. And I broke in and I was on Professional Muscle and bodybuilding.com forums, and you would just kind of read unless you were, bold enough to say something. And if you said something wrong, then like Skip Hill or Dante would like ban you and kick you out for life. And so
Yeah.
it was a different playing field because not everybody had a voice, as weird as it was on the forums back in the day. And now it's, you're scrolling through 27 different platforms of social media trying to navigate what information's correct and what information's
Hmm.
incorrect. And as amazing as it is, because we have all this access to all this great information, now we have the issue where we have to sift through all this kind of like either
Yeah.
complete bullshit information or just overstated, inconsequential information. And it's really hard to
Hmm.
determine what information is real and what information isn't real. And that goes from a 14-year-old kid starting out in the gym to a seasoned pro such as yourself. But
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
like I had mentioned before, being one of the more cerebral competitors out there, I've watched over the years, partially because, we've run in similar circles and we've crossed paths quite a few times and we know a lot of the same people. But also, as a fan of bodybuilding, I've followed your career and I've seen you link up with specific coaches, both for training and for nutrition, that not only are highly respected in their individual fields, but are damn near experts in the specific facets of what they do. So, who are some of the biggest influences on your career and your training and your nutritional practices that you kind of carry with you to this day? Not necessarily people you still work with, but people that have been big influences or educators to you that brought you up to their level.
Well, I don't know. I'm probably still not at that level, but uh, I would say in training, Joe, 100%. Like I think my career would be a lot different with if I did meet him. Outside of that, John Meadows was amazing as well in terms of everything. Like it's cool because a lot of the people that I work with, not only are they, obviously experts in their field, but they're just genuinely good people all around, like good business people, good fathers, good husbands, and it's been really cool to kind of be around that over the years. Um, but yeah, I would say those two in particular. I mean, I have other influences as well, like there's other people that have done, like amazing things for me, but in terms of like education wise, I would say those are two of my biggest influences.
Gotcha. So, of course, we have John Meadows, mountain dog training, and then Joe Bennett, hypertrophy coach. Two tremendous influences on myself as well. I didn't really get the pleasure to really work with John. We bantered a few times. Joe, I know much better, and Joe, I Joe has the displeasure of me bothering him via text and voice note every now and then when I can't figure something out. But he eventually always gets back to me. So that's how I know that I'm like, all right, I'm not that annoying. But, God bless them. So Joe and John, both great people. Focusing on John first, and let's kind of turn this into more of like the nutritional approach to things. What's something that you picked up from John that you either just ran with or kind of developed your own spin on? What was something nutrition, maybe supplementally, that you picked up from him that was kind of like, holy shit, like this is something to run with?
I think John's simplicity was what I preferred. I mean, before him, my previous coach was still a great coach, but he was a lot. I don't know the word, not structured, but just I guess just a lot more things matter in his opinion. Like, oh, you need to have this Starbucks cake before your show, or you need to do this, have these type of things. But with John, it was like it was a lot simpler. I remember he sent me like a plan. I'm like, well, is this it? He's like, yeah, that's it. Or like, in terms of food selection, he was a lot more open. A lot of bodybuilding coaches, he's like, oh, you got to eat the chicken, you got to eat the rice. You have to do, these certain types of foods. Whereas with John, I was like, hey, can I do yogurt and protein as a meal? He's like, yeah, you can do that. He's like, oh, can I do some organic bread and make like with some beef and make like burgers out of it? He's like, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that. And I was like, oh, cool. So he made things a lot easier in that regard. Even leading into like competitions, like not much change. Like we were already ready. So it's like a lot of coaches as well. They'll drastically change your meal plan like the night before, the day of the show. Whereas with them, I was eating the same breakfast, the day of the show. I ate, my entire prep, which I was like, oh man, it was just the most relaxing way to do things, in my opinion, Uh, and that's one thing I really liked about him. It was just, all right, you look great. Let's just keep doing what we're doing.
Now for your coaching now, working with clients with Iron Eden coaching, both with people you're working with or people that, because you have a fantastic team of coaches that your coaches work with, do you prefer with most people taking that relaxed approach? Do you prefer a more specific, stricter approach, or does it vary person to person?
It varies person to person for sure, because you got some people, some people they need extra structure and extra detail. They don't like that freedom of choice. So with those types of people, you write things out very strict and whatnot. But I usually err towards like the more relaxed side, and then once I get a feel for the person, I'm like, okay, well, let's add in a lot more stuff. Um, it just depends. It really depends on the person, like not like mentally, and also just how their body responds. Because some people you check in once a week and they're good to go, and some people you're like, okay, something's not clicking here. Maybe we need to check in every couple days or every single day. We need to check more things, items like just a lot of more health markers. And I don't like to have people checking every day and checking every single thing, because I understand like you have a day job, you got other stuff to do, but if we need to do that, then, so be it.
Right. And I feel like this kind of like flexible approach that varies person to person is probably one of the most overlooked things in coaching right now. And that probably has something to do with the coaching market being so oversaturated with people that are quite frankly unqualified. But I want to circle back to this really quickly, and I'll just double down for you. And I'll say directly right now, and we can clip this into something to put on the internet, that Terence Ruffin, who is a top Olympian and a future Mr. Olympia and an incredibly successful coach, literally just said it depends on the person and you do what's going to work best for the person. And I'll triple down on that, because that's something that I will preach to the masses until the day I die. There's no one way that things have to be done, because it's going to vary on the individual. So I'm going to use that soundbite and gloat about it for the rest of my fucking life. That's great. But really that is the way that it has to be done, because it's not a cookie cutter thing. Cookie cutter doesn't work. So that's fantastic.
I've had people, like you have them try to check in, you try to have them check every day, and they see their waist not moving and they start to freak out, you know. And I'm like, okay, we can't have you wearing yourself every day now. You know what I mean? That's too stressful for you. So it's a lot of different things, man. I mean, you've probably seen it too, where like you something may work for one guy, and then it completely like dismantles a different person.
hmm How much does stress really play into just overall results, performance, day of results? And do you think that that more relaxed approach on the meal plan, for example, that John would take, that you'll take with some clients, is that just mitigating stress enough to keep that cortisol down and just keep them kind of proceeding forward based on the fact that they're not all hung up and stuck in their head?
Yeah, so I've seen it vary over the years in terms of like how people deal with how their bodies deal with stress. Uh, and it can like I've seen some people they can handle it pretty well, but I've seen others where like it completely derails like their weight loss, like they just stop losing weight. And that's, you know, like that can be mental, that can be physical stress, it can be like from not getting enough sleep, or like say I know people they do shift work that can highly affect people as well. You know, relationships and whatnot can cause it really depends on the person, but it can have a huge effect on people, like really really big effect.
So what have you done over the years to kind of mitigate any sort of stress, either from life, business, etc.? Because as long as I've known you, you've been exactly what you described yourself as earlier. You're stoic. So Terence is
Uh,
even keeled. He's calm. That's all I've ever known you to be. But I know that there's got to be situations in life that just drive you nuts sometimes. How do you stay the course and kind of move through stress and still get to your deadlines and hit your goals?
yeah, stoicism helps a lot. I do my best to not stress about things outside of my control and just focus on the things that I can kind of deal with. Um, that doesn't always work, but in those times where it doesn't work, you know, I don't know. I just use different techniques, whether it's just talking with a friend if I need that, you know, or whatever it is. I think in those cases where like I just can't let things go that I can't control, I find like the quickest way to kind of resolve it, whether it's like I said, be chatting with a friend or even seeing a therapist or maybe playing a video game will help me, whatever it may be, you know,
Mhm.
to help me like deal with that and relieve that stress for sure.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be like if you're Googling how to relieve stress or how to proceed in athletics despite stress. It's not eating 75 milligrams of ashwagandha and meditating on top of a mountain with goats or some shit. It's literally just deal with what you can deal with and
Yeah,
move
yeah.
forward how you can, talk to somebody, like the basic stuff.
My biggest thing, man, with life stresses is like just being around the time I've been around is it's like everyone deals with stress. It's not like unique to you, you know, like whatever you're going with, someone else is probably going through it as well. So, and they've gotten through it. So I think that's also something that keeps me kind of centered is like, you know, every hundreds of thousands, millions of people have probably dealt with the same thing and have been fine.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And I think that resonates with a lot of people because sometimes stress management can seem so overwhelming. And now, again, with the influx of information readily available on the internet, everybody's quick to tell you some sort of batshit crazy stress relief thing where you
Yeah.
punch yourself in the vagus nerve while you think happy thoughts and breathe only through one nostril. And it's like, yeah, cool. Maybe that works for some people, but some of us need actionable results that are realistic
Yeah.
alongside our day to day lives as well, too. So I think that's probably the best answer anybody could ever give, despite all the potential science on the planet. That's realistic, which is the most important. Let's talk about Joe Bennett a little bit because I have an episode with Joe coming out a couple weeks after this one. And Joe, to me, in the training realm is untouchable. But
Yeah.
working so closely with Joe for so long, you've been able to take Joe's concepts, amend them to fit you in specific situations, and also branch this off into your own coaching platform to use these techniques successfully with other people, but then also to continue your competitive career at an incredibly high level. Because Joe's stuff is all encompassing. Joe's stuff, he works with bodybuilders, he works with athletes, he works with regular people. What are some of the things that you picked up with Joe? And what are some of those things that might be against the grain to your typical bodybuilding, bro split, just slang some metal, work until you die, every set to failure, all the cliches? What have you learned against the grain with Joe that is now becoming more commonplace?
Yeah, it's funny. Most things that Joe was speaking about, when I first got with him, is pretty common now. For people to say, it's funny. I would say definitely back when, especially when I first started working with him, I was doing a very like high volume, crazy intensity drop sets and whatnot. Once I got with Joe, actually I felt like I thought I was training hard, but I actually wasn't. I still got a picture from my first workout when I'm laid out on the floor. So in terms of like the biggest thing is like just really, really honing in on your form and keeping that form when the set gets hard and not just stopping and giving up. A lot of times I see people give up during a set because it burns. More so than not, I mean, a lot of people see like the lactic acid build up and they're like, oh, I can't do it anymore. I was like, you probably could have did a lot more, honestly. um, so that was the first big thing I learned was like not just stopping when the set gets hard, stopping when you can't get any more done, and doing that with impeccable form because you want to standardize things because if your sets aren't or your reps aren't standardized, how do you know you're truly making progress? So, not like swinging the weight, not like using a different part of your body or changing the way you lift that weight to get more reps. But, so that was another big thing I learned. Obviously, like bodybuilders at the time, some people track things like Dorian and whatnot, but it wasn't commonplace, to have a logbook. And that was another thing for me. And it's funny because looking back when I started, I kind of intuitively did that for like my quad training. I was like, because I wanted to be like Tom Platz. I'm like, I want to, how much did he squat? Like 520 something pounds for like
Mm-hmm.
20 reps. I was like, I want to do that.
20,
So I
21
was,
reps. Yeah.
yeah. So for that, for like my quads, I was always like, progressing. But for every other body part, it just wasn't even something a concept for me. And then once we started to do that with everything else, that's when I really started to grow. And that first year I worked with him, I grew more than the past couple years, and that's not the way it should be. Usually, the rate, the muscle you gain from year to year starts to decline. But
Yep.
um, shoot, I was already maybe a few years in, and we just saw a spike in muscle mass. I was like, "Holy crap!" This stuff works. you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Now, is the
uh,
logbook something that you still run with like 365? You're always logging everything, or is there a time and a place for it?
I log as much as I can. Sometimes I forget because, especially when I'm in a set, I have trouble counting. So I do my best to log every session. I won't say I always do, but I do my best to kind of keep track of things, how I feel, how these things are going. But yeah, I would say the logbook was probably the most important aspect of training for me. Like,
Gotcha. Now, in using the logbook, how do you correlate that with when it's time to switch your split up? Are you doing the same workouts every push day or every chest day or every whatever day and then progressing and then changing the split when you stop progressing? How do you correlate when it's time to change things up a little bit?
yeah, when I stopped progressing, after a couple weeks of not progressing, I changed it up because if it's just one or two sessions, it could be like just a sleep or stress or like maybe something just a little off. And especially as you get, you train longer and longer, that progression is going to slow down a bit. So like, I'm not adding like crazy amounts of weight from week to week. I'm adding like a 5 or even a 2.5. And if it's a curl, I'm adding like a quarter of a pound to the bar or the whatever it may be. So just being patient and making sure that like there's been progress happening there before I decide to change things up.
Gotcha. Now, when it is time to change things up, are you changing the one or two movements that you might not be progressing on, or do you go to a completely different block of training?
It depends on how I feel, to be honest with you. Like I mean, usually for most people though, I'll just change those exercises. But for me, it kind of depends on my mood. Like I do still like maybe got a new machine in the gym or something like that, or maybe I just want to switch it up for whatever reason. Or maybe like I'm like looking at my physique and I'm like, oh well, I kind of want to do this or do that. So that it just depends. But if I had to like tell someone, I would just switch to ones that aren't progressing anymore.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, there's a lot of talk online, and different camps will banter about different stimulus types where we'll do a couple blocks of training in that 6 to 10 rep range, and then a couple blocks of doing more supersets, higher volume, kind of like the way you said you used to train. Is there
Yeah.
a time and a place for different types of training stimulus, or do you just move block to block within that same relative training stimulus that works best for you?
The same stimulus. Yeah. I always used to think it was weird. Like I'm not the most like educated bodybuilder, but I always thought it was interesting because like the whole goal of like how we train was like uh was basically progressing usually through load. So you're getting stronger, that way. But then you'll have some people like, oh, the gain strength you want to do like 4 to 6, and the gain size you want to do, I don't know, is it 6 to 10 or 6 to 12? And I'm like, I'm doing I guess bodybuilding rep ranges and still getting stronger from week to week. So I didn't really see a point in ever dropping it that low. And I know some guys like to do the super high rep ranges. I've never been a fan of that either. I don't know. I don't know. Training with Joe, it's funny. He said anytime we would get over like a certain like number or so, he's like, "Oh man, we're doing cardio now." So I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah." Um, Occasionally, I might do something like that, especially when I train with other people. Even intensifiers, Joe, we really don't do them nearly as much. But when we like years ago, we used to throw an intensifier in, usually at the end of the workout. Like a drop set or like a superset or something like that. Now all the research is saying, oh, you don't really need to do any intensifiers because the fatigue you're building up and things like that. Um, I don't know. I mean, in terms of like building muscle, I mean, I guess research is saying you don't really need any of that, but I still think it's cool to do from time to time. I think I think it's cool to kind of beat yourself up every now and again. And then in addition to that, I do think a lot of newer athletes do need to push the envelope a little bit more because I don't ever, usually I see people their issue is not training hard enough. It's not overtraining. Overtraining is usually not an issue with new people. Like I just got a new client today, and I was like, "Oh, send me some of your training," and none of his sets were anywhere near failure.
Hmm.
So so for people who are by themselves, they don't have someone to push them. I would lean towards them doing a little bit too much, and then than too little because if you're doing too much, it's very easy to see, like you're sore. I'm like, okay, you're sore. You're not recovering well. Then back off the volume a bit. That's an easier fix, and it's very quick because you figure that out in like a week if you're doing too much,
Hmm.
you know?
I love that approach to it too, because in an era where we can all pretty much universally agree that intensity is one of the most important drivers of progress, not everybody can dial that in. So there's a big difference between you doing a set of dumbbell press and a random kid at a Crunch Fitness doing the same set of dumbbell press. You've
Mm-hmm.
been doing this for long enough at such a high level, and this is what you do. Even if you guys are using the same weight for the same amount of reps, your set is going to be much more intense than that person's set. So not everybody can dial things in the same exact way. So I'll always do the same thing. I'll err on the side of, all right, I want the volume to be as low as possible, meriting your intensity. And if I'm looking at your training videos and you look completely put together and not in any discomfort, and you're maintaining a completely stoic look on your face and you don't even look slightly out of comfort, chances are I'm going to make you do more volume because I don't think you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. Whereas if you send
Yeah.
me one video and it looks like the entire gym's going to catch fire, you're probably doing pretty good. So I do think that
Yeah.
makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. That's definitely a way to break things down. Let's go into training splits a little bit, because last I saw you were doing something a little against the grain for that, because we're still in a world where these bro splits are kind of like, well, if you're doing bodybuilding, you need to have each body part have a day and this, that, and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still doing an upper lower split right now?
No, but I did it for a while. It's funny, like when I started, like so with Joe, usually when I have to sit out of the gym for a while, we would always I remember the first time I had to sit. I think I had gyno surgery. I got back in the gym and I just tried to do like our normal push pull leg kind of variation, and like I couldn't do it. I was so sore. I was like, yeah. So he's like, all right, let's try an upper lower split, until you can build up, build back up. And so it was kind of the norm to do that after I took like time off from the gym. So the last time I took time off, I went into the upper lower split, and then it's funny enough, that's when all the research, like it started to get like a really big push online, the upper lower split. So I was like, all right, let me just keep it. I'm already doing it, and I saw a lot of good progress from it. Uh, the only issue I personally found is like just the way my body is. Like my lower body was growing a lot faster than my upper body was.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the main issue I had. So I ended up switching to something a little unorthodox this time around, and I've been enjoying it so far. Uh, I'm training shoulders, arms, and hamstrings 3 times a week, chest and back once, and quads once. And the idea is, the frequency will help me build up those 3 body parts I want to focus on, and the other body parts is just the bare minimum for maintenance. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm enjoying it so far. I feel like it's been going pretty well. Um, Even in terms of like, I was curious to see how my elbow would take it, whether it would bother me or not. But I think just having the volume so low, it kind of keeps things, ticking pretty good. And in addition to that, just the variety in the exercises as well.
Gotcha. So that volume is correlating with the frequency you're saying. So it's not like all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're just tripling the volume. You're taking the volume and breaking it
No.
apart.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's an issue a lot of people find when they try, they especially I've been noticing a lot of people have struggling to make upper lower splits. And I think that's the reason, because they're trying to do like double their volume, like no, you cut it in half, you split it. And so yeah, that's basically what you do. And most times you can probably get slightly more volume if you split it up. Not like a ton more, but like maybe 1 or 2 sets more, as opposed to like a bro split. But yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, by doing it this way, let's say you're doing, and we can get into the numbers afterwards, but let's say for a stubborn body part, you're doing, you know, 12 sets per week. You would do
Hmm.
almost that same, like you would do maybe like 4, 4, and 4, maybe 5, 5, and
Hmm.
5. But the
Yeah.
biggest takeaway is not that little bit of extra volume. The biggest takeaway is that all of those exercises now are maximum intensity, because exercises
Yeah.
number 10, 11, 12 are now exercises number 1, 2, and 3 on another day. So you're going into those
Hmm.
fresh. Now, are you doing different exercises for those body parts? Are you doing different rep ranges? I know you said you like to stick within the same one. How do the days differentiate when you're doing 3 different days where you're hitting, let's say, shoulders all 3 days?
So let's say for shoulders, let's see, I'm trying to remember. One day I'm doing like the machine laterals, another day like cables, and then the last day actually I just do a shoulder press. And even with the shoulder press, I was like, okay, I can do it. That's mostly delts, but I get a little bit of upper chest, so I'm kind of hitting chest
Mm-hmm.
twice ish a week. So mainly different exercises, but still hitting this. Let me put this on silent. Um, Different exercises, but still trying to hit that same muscle group. Like so. I mean, the shoulders are pretty simple, but trying to think of an exercise that would be different. So, like for back, it would be still hitting, like still doing rows, different types of rows, but obviously I'm still hitting the lats. Just a different apparatus in my hand or I'm using. Um, but yeah, yeah. The rep ranges are the same ish. My rep range is like 6 to 12, so I keep it pretty wide. Um, yeah.
Now I'm going to put you in the hot seat right now, and I'm going to make you
Okay.
speak in kind of a generalization. But again, it's not like I'm saying anything controversial. It's not going to make anybody mad per se. But hot seat, straightforward answer: are most bodybuilders and recreational lifters dropping the ball by focusing too much on volume and not enough on frequency?
Yeah, yeah. I would say that. I mean, Yeah, especially anytime you have a weak body part, 100%. I think a lot of bodybuilders go straight to the volume route and instead of the frequency route. I think the only time I don't see that from bodybuilders and if it's quads and hamstrings. That's the only time I've seen like just like traditional bodybuilders split something up. But if it's like arms or back or chest, it's a rare, it's rare. It's more rare.
What are your thoughts on two-a-day training?
Oof. It's a 2 a day training. It's tough for most people, just life wise, work wise, things like that. Even me, I split up my upper lower into a 2 a day type deal, and it's just a lot to hit the gym twice a day, especially if you got cardio on top of that.
Right, right. Now, is that driving up an additional need for recoverability, or do you need to pay even more attention to your nutrition if that's the case? Or is that kind of downgrade or maybe maintaining the same total volume in the week and just splitting up even more? Does that allow you to keep your nutrition relatively similar?
Um, so when I was doing it, I did have to increase my food a bit to kind of to keep up with that, which was very difficult. Um, but in terms of recoverability, I think I mean, obviously, since you're managing your food, yeah, you kind of do need a little bit more, but it's not a ton different, in my opinion, from when I was doing it, especially with the upper lower split, since I was taking 3 days off from the gym, you know. Um, and now, yeah, I think we should explain that too. Yeah, with the upper lower split, I only hit the gym 4 times a week. I know some people will do like some people think the upper lower split they're doing like 2 on 1 off, 2 on 1 off repeat. I've never done it that way. It's usually 2 on 1 off, 2 on 2 off. So usually like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, hit the gym. And yeah, yeah. So 2 days were just very difficult in terms of just timing and schedule wise.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, it's one of those things where it looks good on paper and then you have to actually put the time in. And then basically, unless you're living off of a trust fund or something, I mean, you got to make money. You got
Yeah.
to, be a partner if you have a partner, be a dad if you have a kid, be a mom if you have a kid, et cetera, et cetera. Some of this stuff seems very appealing. And, some of us have the luxury of having a gym in our garage or something like that. But even that, I
Okay.
mean, it's still a giant time commitment. So I think
It
used
is.
strategically, it can be decent, but to just jump into this advanced plan, I remember at MI40 once, probably back in 2019. I don't want to name any names, but somebody that was there and myself were under the influence of, I don't want to name any hallucinogenics. And we spent the entire morning just writing like a two-a-day 3 month split all over the whiteboard, and it wrapped around the entire thing. Like it looked like, you ever that meme of Charlie Day like standing in front of the
Yeah,
whiteboard? Like
yeah.
it looked like that once we kind of came down off of it. So it didn't make a lot of sense, but it was one of those things that it was on paper seemed awesome, totally
Mhm.
unexecutable in real life.
It's tough because even you think like you're actually just splitting however long you're in the gym, hour and a half, into two 45-minute sessions. But then you got to think about the time to get there and like, maybe you see someone and whatever, and then it ends up being still like an hour and a half, like but 2 times a day now. So
Yeah,
you're just like, God dang.
exactly. There's no way it becomes less work. It always becomes more, maybe for brief spells. But regardless, even not doing two-a-days and even doing this, higher frequency split, that even with the rest days, it's still going to be fairly demanding on the system. How do you keep an eye on your recovery? Are you just going by feel? Are you going by like how your sleep quality is? Are you tracking with a Whoop or an Oura ring? Like, how do you keep tabs on your actual recoverability?
Just how I feel. So it did take a minute to kind of figure out volume wise, kind of what I can tolerate. But I just started lower and just kind of slowly ramped it up until I hit that wall, and I was like, okay, this is too much, and then I kind of backed off. I know there's some people that are fans of really like or throughout a mesocycle adjusting their volume, like slowly increasing it, and then doing the deload periods. I've never been a fan of that, to be honest. I've always been a fan of like, okay, just stick it to what you can recover from, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then you don't have to take all these deloads every 2 months or however long you program it in for. Um, but yeah, I just kind of choose a volume that works for me, and anytime I do need like a deload period or whatever, it usually kind of coincides with me just finishing a show. Like, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
done with my show. Let me kind of take it easy for a couple of weeks, and that's the way I've always kind of gone about it.
So you're basically just looking for like, especially when you're saying when you're kind of like playing with the volume a little bit initially on maybe a new split,
Mm-hmm.
where you're going to kind of ride it up based on what you feel like you can handle. What are those telltale signs that let you know like, ooh, this is a bit much?
The easiest thing is like just soreness. Outside of that, sleep would probably be the other thing if my sleep's off, or uh, another thing I could you could probably think of is like if you're getting weaker in the gym. So sometimes you may not feel sore, but if your numbers start to you're like, okay, maybe I need to kind of ease up a bit, or take some time off. So those are some of the easy signs that I've noticed personally. I know there's other things that people will mention like brain fog and things like that, but um, just physically, the soreness and the sleep quality and performance in the gym are the main three things I usually look for.
Gotcha. And the thing is, I feel like that's the low hanging fruit in a good way. Again,
Mm,
some of us tend to get a little bit, overly nuanced on it. I'll admit to that. I'm
I know,
wearing a
Joe.
Whoop right now.
Yeah,
I've got a Whoop with these weird moon rocks that allegedly block the EMFs from the Whoop. Like I'm that
Oh,
guy.
cool. Okay,
But
okay.
it's not cool. It's nerdy and neurotic. But whatever, it looks nice. Nonetheless, also it's because I'm supposed to wear the Whoop here and not on my wrist, and this kind of reminds me to push it down there. So it's again neurotic
Mm,
as fuck. That's some of us. But the low hanging fruit and the stuff that basically tells you the information straightforward is usually the stuff that's right in front of you. So pay attention
mm,
to your sleep. Pay attention to whether or not you're sore, overly sore, too sore. And then above all, I think pay attention to, are you progressing in the gym? Are you getting stronger week by
100%.
week, or are you getting weaker? And there probably is a little bit to consider with that in terms of, am I now 3 weeks out from a show? Maybe I'm supposed to feel a little
Yeah,
bit more
yeah,
beaten up. But in
yeah.
terms of that with the training, not to open up a whole other topic, does that training change a few weeks out from the show? If so, how does it, or how little will it change?
Well, if we had intensifiers in the program, that those are completely cut. I mean, the biggest thing going into a show is just trying to reduce stress and fatigue on the body. So that, and then even managing the volume. Usually, I have to lower my volume just a tad. I mean, I'm not doing much in the first place, but dropping the volume by a couple sets here or there, especially on like big movements, like say for instance, I'm doing like an RDL or a deadlift or a squat. Those will drop down, um, just to kind of make sure I'm feeling okay. Uh, but yeah, that's the biggest changes. Like I know a lot of people, especially back in the day, they would say, oh man, when you get close to a show, you need to do more reps and less
Mm-hmm.
weight to bring in the detail or whatever. And I've never been one to do that. Actually, I take it back. I did that my first before I met Joe, and personally, I felt I lost a bit of size
Mm-hmm.
going doing that. Now I try to keep the loads the same to kind of hold on to that muscle mass that I built, because man, I keep seeing all these studies coming out, and they're kind of disheartening to a certain degree, where you see like, oh, you can start to lose muscle. I think what was it, like a week or so after your last session, and if you're not training, you're not. Was it this is all new for me. If you're not stimulating those muscle fibers, you can lose muscle like a couple of days after a
Yep.
session. You know.
It was no stimulation within a few days. You start to actually begin a process of atrophy, according to these studies.
Yeah, I'm like, man, it's insane how quickly it starts. I mean, obviously, it's the amount. I'm assuming the amount is very small, but it's insane how quickly that process begins.
Mm-hmm.
Um. So yeah. It's a bit much, but yeah.
Right. Well, even beyond the science that's emerging now, like if you look at it through just a common sense lens, your food is at its lowest leading into the show in most cases. So your fuel is at its lowest. Thereby, your output probably shouldn't be at its highest. So volume technically needs to come down, not go up. That's not the time to add the intensifiers and the drop sets and the supersets. Then furthermore and beyond that, we have to take into consideration that we do have to stimulate the muscle, and a stronger muscle is more likely, and at least in my opinion, to stay put than a weaker
Yeah.
muscle. So maybe you're not actively getting stronger, but I feel that if you're fighting to maintain that strength, that's your best bet of kind of staying in the races in terms of not losing muscle. Kind of like switching back to the topic of just the training split, I'm going to put you in the hot seat again. For a general fitness enthusiast, let's say of like an intermediate level, not necessarily advanced, that either wants to step things up to get kind of into the competitive realm, maybe start prepping for their first bodybuilding show, or maybe just wants to level things up and take their physique to the next level. What's the best split in general?
That wants to do the first show. uh, Personally, man, I've always loved like a push pull legs variation. Um, so you're not training. I don't believe you should do 3 on, one off repeat. But I do think it should be like a five day train, thing. So push pull legs, rest, and then you can kind of decide what you need to work on most those second 2 days, and then rest again. So you could do even on those 2 days, you could do push legs, pull legs. You could do just a whole upper day legs. You can do arms, legs. You can do whatever you want to do on those second 2 days, whatever needs that frequency.
I agree with that 1,000%. And again, those small details will be more dependent on the person, the individual. Tell me a little bit about Iron Eden.
Oh yeah, man! It's a coaching company we built. Shoot, I think it's 2.5 years ago. I was with another company before that, and I just felt the need that I wanted to have very high quality coaches. A lot of coaching teams, they'll choose people just based on like how popular they are, how they're doing, competitively. And I was like, oh, that's not the best way to kind of choose coaches. Let's try to figure out something where, we choose educated people based on like what they know and their merit, versus just completely on how they look and, how they do at the show. So, yeah, we've been going for a while, and it's going great, man. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. I've seen that company kind of grow since its inception. I know a few of your coaches personally, and I can say nothing but good things about the team that you put together. And then with your direction, obviously, based on if somebody has watched this and, hey, they'd never heard of you until this podcast, I'm pretty sure the information presented is enough to kind of keep somebody confident in the fact that your team is doing things the right way and they're working for the client and not vice versa. So tremendous props on how you built that company. It's been awesome to watch that grow. We've got you coming up. Pittsburgh Pro, you said, is the show on the horizon. So
Yeah,
everybody's
yeah.
going to be paying attention to that, paying attention to Iron Eden for coaching, watching that grow. Terence, where are the best places for people to get a hold of you?
Oh man, rough diesel everything. The website, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. Coaching, we got Iron Eden, coaching.com. And yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Terence, thank you so much for being on the show. Would love to have you back at some point, maybe a little bit closer to or after the show. And would love to kind of do a little bit of recap on your prep a little bit more specifically, but that's for the future. All the best and everything going forward. Guys, if you're watching this and you don't follow Terence, please follow him, because there's so many people out there, especially kind of in the limelight at the higher level, that are putting up nothing but, here's me posing and here's me looking decent. With Terence, you're getting all that, plus you're actually getting the education and the information behind it, and you're kind of able to follow along with the journey, which in my opinion is the right way to do things. I don't want to go on a rant about how people follow the wrong people, but most of you
Yeah.
follow the wrong people. So let's focus on following the right people you can learn from and guide your own careers and your training after. Terence, again, thank you so much for being on. Would love to have you back at some point, and all the best in your prep for the show, and keep me in the loop. I'd love to hear about how it's going.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. You have a great day, man.
You too. Ladies and gentlemen, that was IFBB Pro Olympian Terence Ruffin. Now, hopefully this was a great experience for you to actually dig into the mindset of an IFBB Pro, but not just dig into the mindset of an IFBB Pro, but one of the smartest ones currently competing on the active circuit. Terence, thank you for coming on. We're looking forward to having you on again in the future.